who is going to be the first guy that just says, you know what, I really do like it here, and I'm going to back it up with a little bit of action, and I'm going to stop making these contract negotiations go into day 21 where we're fighting over the extra $1 million. Like, I do think that part of this with Nylander, like, don't you feel as though there's an extra part of it where Tree Living has to go, we need to stop that cycle, the cycle of the top guys constantly looking for the biggest bag?
Oh, that's going to be the hardest cycle to stop, especially when the biggest guys got already $12.5 million and $11.5 million. How do you stop that cycle when you go back into each and every negotiation and you're already like, well, I'm at 11.5. I got close to 100 points. What can you do as Tree in order to stop that cycle? I think it is to get rid of one of these players. Is Nylander the player pushing himself out by doing this and making this situation kind of arise? So again, we talk about the core four. Who needs to move? Obviously, Nylander would be the last choice of a lot, minus Matthews. But is he the guy that could individually just stop the cycle by doing what he's doing, if that makes sense? So again, moving a core player out, maybe he's a guy who pushes himself out. That starts to get leverage back into the GM's hands on negotiations going forward, saying, if you aren't willing to do this, we'll look to move you on, and you can go somewhere else to try to find your 10, 12, 14 million in a flat cap era.
Yeah, I mean, the cap is going to start to go up, and part of me keeps...
What is it, 1 million?
It's $1 million this year, but then it's supposed to spike the following season, and then some people are projecting a pretty sizable jump like 2 years from now. That all of a sudden this thing is going to grow, exponentially, and that these guys are going to be on really good deals. That's why you're seeing dudes like Bertuzzi and Domi and the rest. Orlov took only 2 years, right? A lot of guys are bucking trends of being top-tier free agents, and there's no money this year. There hasn't been.
I look at these guys, though, and they are 27, 28, 29.
Yeah.
Orlov's 29, 30. I do really like I do like taking short deals.
Yeah.
I also think taking the short deal in your mid-20s makes a lot more sense than 28, 29. Not saying that they won't, or not saying that it won't happen, but if the cap does go up 5-6 million, are they going to invest in a guy like Orlov for another 6-7 years at 7+, or are they going to take that money back and go back into their guys off entry-level contracts or second-level contracts that mean more to the team, where they'd rather give that extra cap space to those guys? So again, that's a bit of a risk that you're willing to take. I like the understanding of it, but the Orlov and these guys later on in their career, Bertuzzi, what's Bertuzzi now, 27, 28?
Yeah,
and he's only 1 year.
28, yeah.
He's 28. So getting close to 30 puts a lot of GMs on pins and needles in negotiations. It just does, especially going past 3 or 4 years. So I understand what they're doing. I like what they're doing. And, you have all these cap guys expecting the cap to go up. But that money I would pursue, or I would expect, would go back into the younger players again. Not saying that's where I would like it to go, but I would believe that's where the money would go, rather into these 30-year-old free agents.
Sure. The thing is, though, you play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is the guarantee with this is you're not in Dallas, where a year from now they might go, you know what, never mind. We're not spending up to the cap or over the cap. You're in Toronto, where you've got Brandon Pridham, who's going to figure out how to get $1 under the salary cap and ice a hockey team. You're on a team where LTIR is not an issue, right? Burying cash is not an issue. You're going to be provided with every single thing. And so if you're these guys and you're talking about taking these deals and reinvesting or taking the money, you know that the Leafs are going to make good on that. Like, they're going to spend money. And the part of this that's I still think is not being discussed enough is the last time all these contracts happened, everyone got up in arms because they went, Dubas's big mistake was not getting Matthews done first. And then that was this consensus. Matthews should have done first, because then you could have slotted in everybody else in line and blah, 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 blah. And now here we have it, where they're negotiating with Matthews, but they're negotiating with Nylander. Both things quiet, but Nylander has all the attention because they've figured out a way to say, hey, Matthews' number looks to be pretty well set. We've heard things like 4 years. We've heard up to 6 years. We've heard around $14 million that he wants to be a Maple Leaf. So it's just been pushed to the side. But I'm going, I'll never forget this. I remember hearing Sidney Crosby on Spit and Chicklets, like the one interview that he ever did where he actually gave some stuff. And he talked about how he knew he and Gino were up for contracts at the same time. And he knew he had to take $1 million less. And if you remember that last contract that Sidney Crosby was on, it was incredible, right? I think he took $887, right? Yeah, like he took the $887, and he said, I knew I had to take less to show the other guys how this was going to operate, that I was committed to winning, and I needed them to be committed to winning too. And business and cap going up and all this stuff, fine. But I don't know why there isn't a little bit more attention on, hey, why isn't the Matthews deal just done? Why isn't he just showing, hey, this is sort of where I'm slotting in at, and then letting the rest of the dominoes fall when it comes to the Nylander? I wonder if he's like, if there's a part of him that's waiting on how the Nylander thing plays out and whether that's going to bump his number or how that's going to do things. But why aren't they just making sure that Matthews gets done before they even move on a Nylander?
Well, there's a reason one side hasn't agreed on it yet, and we don't know what side that is unless you do. But I just think, you look at Matthews, how much does he want out of this? How much term? And is that something they're willing to go on? Does he want to do another short-term deal? You're saying 4 years. I haven't heard anything on the entire Matthews front at all yet. So if I'm looking at Nylander now, I'm sure he would like to go longer at, you're saying, a $10 million term. Mm-hmm. But it comes back to Matthews. There's someone not agreeing on the side. Otherwise, the deal would be done. Is it Brad or is it Matthews? I have no idea.
I think it's just Matthews. I think the Leafs are pretty much accepting that he's one of the game's best players, regardless of how people feel about it. Just the frustrating thing is that with him, it's always felt like he wants the money and the term, that it doesn't matter how many years it is. He wants the same amount of money, right? Like,
yeah, here's the other thing you never touched on with Toronto is endorsements.
Of course, dude. That's what I love about Domi coming here. And he's already got Friedman put out on 32 Thoughts that he wants to be a Leaf for life. This is home. He's always wanted to play here. And I'm like, yeah, because he saw how it works for his dad. His dad hangs out with Tom Brady in the offseason. Yeah. You think that happens if he plays for Arizona? That Tom Brady was like, who? Ty Domi of the Arizona Coyotes, of the Dallas Stars?
You got Mark Wahlberg, all these guys commenting on his post. It's pretty incredible. And that's the type of viewership he's bringing now to this team, because obviously what his father did, and it's amazing. But those are the type of eyeballs that are bringing, to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Tom Brady's going to watch a game now. These guys are going to watch a game. So endorsements, where does the money start to go? Who's Bet99 betting on now? Who are all these companies willing to throw money at for endorsements? So you're like, again, you're talking $10 million. Why? Like, who was talking about Tavares a while ago? Why didn't he take $10 million and then get $2 million in endorsements? Or was it $12 million or Stamkos? I remember they were talking about $2 million.
Stamkos had the one where he, in the negotiation, the Canadian Tire guy was there famously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, wink, wink. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of deals that can be done outside of being a Toronto Maple Leaf and your contract with Toronto Maple Leafs that allows you to make extra income, which you could not make with the Florida Panthers, could not make with the Philadelphia Flyers, even though the Philadelphia Flyers are considered an A-plus club. It's just on the endorsement side. Mm-hmm. No one can make the amount of money they can like they could in Toronto endorsement-wise.
Yeah, okay. I know this is a business, and I know that these guys want to set themselves up, and we live in the Instagram era where you compare yourself to everybody else, and they probably even see the NBA money being thrown around and go, well, why can't I be like this, especially a guy like Matthews? But I'm sorry. I'm just so tired of the money first before the winning, and it's happening again. These guys got embarrassed again in the playoffs, and we hit the offseason. It starts with them all going, we want to stay in Toronto. We love Toronto. We feel like we're building something. We feel like we took a step forward by beating Tampa, blah, 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 blah. And then they step towards the negotiating table and they go, so you want to be in Toronto? And they're like, yeah, for, $14 and $10 million plus all those endorsements you're talking about. Let's figure all that stuff out before we hit the ice. Like, how about you just go and figure out what your priorities are? And if the priority is once again just money, 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 everything, and it's not the winning, it just feels so secondary, I feel like that it just ends up being pervasive throughout the rest of the culture of the team. And so, yeah, that's why, to me, the Nylander thing, if he ends up having to be the sacrificial lamb, I don't mind it as much if you're sending a message around the rest of your locker room and even to Mitch Marner a year from now going, there's a breaking point here, and we will take a step back in a trade to take a step forward as an organization.
Well, that's exactly it. And basically answering your question to me about 2 minutes ago is what's going to break this cycle. And I think that's it. You got to let someone be the sacrificial lamb. You're going to let someone negotiate themselves out of this situation. Now, for Brad, you got to have a backup plan of who you're going to bring in order to fill those slots and those holes. And I'm sure he does. He's a very smart guy in that understanding. He's always got a plan B, plan C, plan D. But that could be the way in order to break the cycle. And it would suck to happen because I really like Nylander.
Same.
I like him in big moments. I hate how Keefe utilizes him. Keefe completely messed with, I believe, his game, especially when he was playing at the top of his game in the playoffs. And I would hate to see it happen again. But maybe that's also a little of a hidden piece going into this is Nylander understanding that this can happen at any time with Keefe as the coach. Can slightly bury him, can put him on the second power play unit, which is fine. I don't mind spreading out the power play units. But, when Mitch isn't going, when certain guys aren't going, why is there no flip-flop there? When he's playing, why is he not getting more than 17 minutes? So I think maybe in his mind, he's like, well, I'm going to go for as much as possible, understanding that this, the coach at the end of the day does dictate how much ice you're going to get and what your output could be. So looking at that could be a little bit of a hidden piece in this as well, saying, if Keith's going to do this, I'm going to do this as well.
Well, and there's also, I would have to think a little bit of, he's been a market whipping boy for a while. He was the guy, they dragged out the contract negotiation with him in the first place. And I know it's a different GM, different coach, but Babcock could be hard on him at times too. And the fan base has been tough on Nylander in moments. I think that's a little overstated. To me, most people are fine with him and they think he's good. And I don't think Nylander hears your uncle on the couch complaining about how he's, he's not committed enough. So
he's a night off guy.
Sure.
Give him his
I know,
off, whip on him, let him have it.
Sure.
Give him his money.
That's the part of it where it just, every time I come back, I argue all this stuff. And then I go, man, 2 years from now. And I hate thinking about 2 years from now because it's so many things could happen. But I just go, if the cap spikes what it's going to spike, would I rather have, Lindholm and Hannafin, who probably walks, and maybe Lindholm on a long deal that's a few million less than William Nylander? I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. So anyway, it's a tough one for me. Here's one. Are the Leafs better today, right now? You're looking at the roster. Let's just play it that it is what it is, what we know right now. Are they better right now than the team that you saw exit the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Panthers last year?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Without doubt. And it's no question to me. And it all comes from what they're going to add into the room, the culture. The guys like Reeves that are going to, they may speak up at times when the team doesn't act right, or maybe they don't have energy on a Tuesday in Carolina, or maybe they need a physical piece to the game. So you have Reeves. You bring in Domi, a kid that, you obviously, he grew up loving the Leafs. It's what his dad was. He's a god. He's an icon here. And this is a kid that's going to add tons of energy every night. You have Bertuzzi, who's a way bigger upgrade on Bunting. He can do a lot more than Bunting. I know Bunting and his stats could be relatively the same at times throughout the past 2 or 3 years. But Bertuzzi adds more of a physical element, I believe, than Bunting. He's just a bigger body, and he's a better player. And you're adding bad boys. I said it. You're not adding bad people. You're adding bad boys. And everyone always wants, this guy's a great guy in the locker room. His mom is a great person. It's just like, shut up. Shut up. Add guys that want to win. And sometimes you got to add bad guys. Sometimes you got to add guys that are going to rock the boat. You're going to have to add guys that are going to speak when they're not necessarily asked to speak. You need guys that are going to be there when the moments get bad. Think about Sam Bennett. You're going to need a guy to go in to punch him in the face. And I love Sam Bennett, but he's a bad guy. He's not a bad person.
Yeah,
he's a bad guy.
We get it. We know what you're saying.
But that's what everyone's. Well, is he a good guy? Is he good in the lot? Well, shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
You need bad guys.
You
need Evander Kane's to go out there. You need Matthew Tkachuk's. Look over the history of winning. How many teams had 20 good guys? None. None. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. You're going to need the odd bad guy out there to do bad things. You're going to have to get into bad areas of the ice. You're going to need to punch a guy in the face, and that's what those three guys, I believe, are going to do. Not Klingberg, but I like Klingberg. I know we kind of debated the Klingberg side
we'll
of it.
talk about it in a sec.
Yeah, but those three guys add an element that this team's needed. We've asked for. They bring in Kyle Clifford. Okay, let's go back to this, actually. It does worry me how Keefe will utilize them all or stick them in their roles, because when Keefe sticks a guy in a role, they never come out. So Clifford, don't need to go back there. He's a bad guy. Never used him. But these guys are also upgrades skill-wise on Cliff. But that's the one thing that worries me, is the coaching and how they're going to be utilized. But I love the upgrade in these areas.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you don't care as much about who wins the Masterson this year.
I do not care.
Yeah, you don't think that the Leafs need another Masterson?
Never cared about it. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
Sure.
What is the Masterton, or what's the other one? What's the Masterton?
Well, the Lady Bing is the least penalties. Yeah.
Okay, Lady Bing is the one.
The community
one
is the Masterson.
I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
Chuck the Lady Bing out.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I know. There was nothing more embarrassing as a Leafs fan than them going years and years without an individual winning any award, and then McGillney won the Lady Bing. And it's like, there you go, Toronto. You got an award. That's what I'm saying about the Stars, though.
You need dogs, man.
Yeah,
you literally need dogs.
You're preaching to the choir here. You're preaching to the choir. This is the thing. There are certain people where what you're saying right now, they're just standing ovation. It's people that are listening. Their headphones are falling out because they're jumping up and down, fist pumping, or they're at their desk and they bang their knee on it because they did yes, Kris, yes, you know exactly what you're talking about. I agree. And they have these quotes that all look really nice, and they go, oh, you need more snot in the game. But how would you feel if you were one of the guys that's on this team right now? Let's say the core five, right? Because it's Riley, Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, Marner. How would you feel if your new GM came in and Ryan Reeves, outspoken guy, multiple people are starting to say this? I've heard they have a quiet room. I've heard they have quiet practices.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. It's not good at all. Let's take you back. It's probably a shot at them, to be honest, and that's how they're taking it. I was in a Calgary back in the day, and I remember Brouwer, Beauty, one of my best buddies, goes around the room and they're asking him what it's like to play Calgary, prior to coming to Calgary, and he said, it was an easy game, point night, and you look at all the guys that were in Calgary and they're like, are you kidding me, Brow? And Brow didn't really realize what he said, but God love Brouwer. So that's the type of thing, is when you're coming into that situation and outside guys are saying that's what their perceptive is, or that's what they hear, deep down, you take that as maybe a slight bit of an insult. Maybe you think about it, why is that a piece of our team that hasn't been upgraded? I always go back to, what does the coach want? What does the GM want? Dubas, he's obviously very analytical in his thinking. He wants certain guys to fill certain roles throughout the regular season because it gives you a better zone entry rate or whatever it may be. You cannot quantify or cannot understand what the value of a guy like Reeves in the room is, because it's the daily energy added to the room. So if he's a guy saying that, you probably take it as a bit of a shot. But in pro sports, you got to have a short memory and not think of it that way. You got to think of it as, okay, maybe that is, something. Again, you go back to the weeds. The guys that have been in the weeds forever, you need a guy to come from out of the weeds, parachute in, and tell you what they see from up above. So maybe that is something that those five guys could look at as a perspective as what they need. And it is what they need. We've heard it forever. They need guys that are going to make noise in that room. They're going to sometimes question what the coach wants. That are going to sometimes punch another guy in the face. Those are bad guys. Those are what they need, but they need to play them.
Yeah, I think that I mentioned this yesterday, that a lot got made about the Reeves 3 years, but it's really not. It's 3 years in name only. They can bury basically all of the money immediately, and this is what I'm talking about when you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. They don't care if they have to put Ryan Reeves' money down. And also, it was brought up by Myrtle yesterday, which is a good point, that you waive him, some other team's probably going to pick him up because they value that same thing. They value him coming into the
Minnesota
room.
valued it.
Yeah, exactly.
Minnesota valued it. New York valued it. Sometimes maybe it runs its course, but
that was my follow-up.
Yeah, again, it can run its course. Andrew Shaw, great friend of mine, same type of thing. He would be in the room some days, and I'd be, tired on a Tuesday. Let's use the Tuesday Carolina analogy. he would be still yapping in the room at 9 a.m. in the morning. He'd be, in guys' faces at practice. Sometimes you'd want to fight him yourself, and I'd say, I'm going to punch you. You're slightly annoying right now. But that type of energy every single day does rub off on guys, and that is a trait that you need. You look at all the best teams over the history of time, there's always those type of guys. And you're right, yes, it can run its course, just like a coach being a prick day in and day out. Those things can run its course. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that's a different type of person with a different type of energy, different thought process that adds significant value to a team that especially needs it, like the Leafs.
All right, let's have the Klingberg discussion. I've come around a little bit on it, just because I like the idea of buying low. And yeah, you still are buying low. It's a 1-year deal, $4 million. It's fine, right? He's a guy who a couple of years ago with Dallas had an incredible run in the postseason, was an absolute stud. Last couple of years haven't been good. I don't like to think that it's all aging. I like to think that some of it is team, like situational, what has happened with him. But it is always tough, too, where a guy bets on himself like he did with the Anaheim deal. And I know that team stunk, but then you completely stink along with it. And it wasn't as though Minnesota was clamoring to try to keep him around. Toronto takes him. So I like the offensive upside. The defensive stuff is sort of whatever. But my biggest thing right now is I don't know where he fits into the top four, who you actually match him with, and how it fits for Toronto. And yeah, all right, again, maybe they make another deal. But yeah, what do you like most about the Klingberg contract? Because, or just him as a player. Because, you seem way more high on it than I am.
Second or third D pair. Liljegren is the type of guy where I could see him even slotting in that spot on the third D pair. So if we're thinking about, what hole he can slot into, and he can also play higher up in the lineup if someone gets hurt, he could go on to the second D pair. He could go on to the first D pair to take minutes, eat minutes on guys that generally a guy like Liljegren maybe couldn't, or a guy coming out of the lineup could or could not do. So that's the type of guy, that's a value add, a veteran who can eat minutes on any D pair at any time. Again, might be a second, maybe a third D pair, don't really know that yet. Where I find the value is the power play. What do we talk about Riley? Goes to sleep every January, February, wakes up in the playoffs, has great playoffs. This is the type of player that you can just slot in on a first power play unit. If he's not doing what he needs to do, you could put Riley back. So now you have a secondary defensive piece that can go onto that top unit. That's not named Rasmus Sandin, that isn't here anymore, or guys like that. So I like him. Right-hand shot. If you play Matthews on his one-timer, now you have two one-time options rather than a lefty playing catch with Matthews consistently and just trying to set him up for that one-timer one way. Now you have a one-timer coming back at you from the top as well. So that's the first thing I like about having Klingberg up top, and his feet movement. He's so good with his feet walking the blue line, creating new passing lanes, creating new spaces on the ice. He's got a great wrist shot, and that's a piece I believe the Leafs haven't had consistently on the power play really for a long time. That's not a shot at Riley. I love what Riley does. I just don't think he walks the blue line and has a soft of hands at doing it as a guy like Klingberg does. And then again, adding that right-hand shot piece, if you're going back and forth with Matthews, now you have two bomb options, not just one from very critical areas on the ice to score goals. I don't know where he'll fit. I have no idea, but I think it will be somewhere on that second, third D pair right side. Maybe start second D pair. If his defensive game drops off, put him and protect him on the third D pair. He is an upgrade on Gus. We've talked about it. I don't know if you agree with that. I think he is.
Yeah,
he's an upgrade
Gus
on Gus.
cost $875 on a 1-year deal.
He's better on the power play too.
Sure.
He's better on the power play. He's better 5-on-5 than Gus. He's just a better player than Gus. And Gus is a good player.
He's big. He's right-handed. And
he can be nasty. Maybe he might be also that type of guy when he's in a situation, the lights are shining, maybe Toronto. You never know how guys act. Sometimes they can shrink to the pressure. Sometimes they can rise. Maybe he is a guy that rises to the pressure. Maybe he loves playing in the limelight when the lights are shining the brightest. So that's another side piece to this entire thing is how does he play when the lights shine? Mm-hmm. I think he could be a guy that accepts the challenge and rises to it too.
God, I hope so. It still feels to me, though, like there's going to be another shoe to drop with the blue line. That Tree Living wants to improve it, and that just adding him, losing Hall doesn't feel – I'll just say it feels lateral.
They need one more guy a penalty kill guy,
Yeah,
reliable veteran.
That's
who out there is to get it. There is one more piece to add that, it could be a 6-7 whether Liljegren falls out to this, maybe he comes in as a
Liljegren,
7.
man, your boy Gio, who's
And
loved
I
in the
know
city. He's
Gio,
40.
Yeah, you could. Everyone was on Gio. I'm going to stick up for Gio.
No, but he's
He could
40. He's 40 years old. Like,
yeah, but he can fall in and out of the lineup too to give him rest on some days. He can still contribute enough of what you need, reliable minutes, especially in a market like this. He doesn't shrink to the challenge. So, he's a guy that could be in and out of the lineup, but still give you value. Him, Liljegren, who's that third veteran piece that you bring in?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the minors here enough.
No, they got nothing. No, there's nothing.
Okay,
no,
so there you go. I have no idea.
The cupboard is very, very, very empty.
You're telling me there's no 24-year-old big D man playing for the Marlies right now that could possibly fill, a big guy that could possibly, there's nothing.
No. There's no guy on the Marlies right now that you're excited about coming up and playing for the Leafs. No, there's not. I will say that I feel like you can usually get those guys late on PTOs and on cheap deals. We saw that with the way that they grabbed Ben, like they grabbed Jordy Ben last year. I think there'll be types of guys like that are kicking around. To me, though, if you're Toronto, you need something a bit better than that. And right now, their 7th D is Connor Timmins, and that's not exciting anybody. That was still the weirdest.
I don't mind him at times, though.
Sure, but yeah, it's fine. And whatever. It was just a strange decision, I thought, to make sure that you gave him money in the middle of last year to make sure that he was going to be sticking around. I went, okay, he just got waived and he wants to be here. And yeah, fine. Yeah, he's fine. You don't mind him in a regular season game, but if I ever had to watch a playoff game with Connor Timmins in it, I don't think I'd feel too great about it.
Well, maybe he can build our trust throughout the.
Okay. Before you go, I liked some of the stuff that you did say at Collision, and I did want to give you a bit of a space here just to talk about Clever, because I'm watching you at the conference, and I think that we have a lot of, hockey is for everyone, and we have a lot of discussions about hockey, and man, it's just such an expensive ass sport. And there are so many advantages that some kids have over others, and especially now, like that gap only feels like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I liked sort of what you were saying about inclusivity, especially even from like a financial standpoint and a tool standpoint with this app. And like you and I always plug Clever, and I know what the app is, and I like it, and I always try to advocate it for parents and coaches. But I wanted to give you just a couple of minutes to talk about it here in terms of, why you started this. And the real reason behind this app, because I think that's a more powerful way to kind of motivate parents and coaches to take a peek if they haven't already.
Well, at the end of my career, athletes and parents were trying to send me video, and there was just no efficient way to get that video, teach it, and share it. So I started to look at all these platforms, and all the video platforms were very expensive. And then what I started to find is every single platform was, well, first off, they're desktop and very hard to use, but they're very dedicated towards the 1%. NHL teams, AHL teams, NCAA, high-end academies, people that could afford it. So then when we started to build out Clever, we're like, how do we build an app for just any parent, any coach, any athlete to be able to come on and still have some of the tools that the 1% are getting? So that's why we built Clever. It was really just with everyone in mind and trying to make sure that, hockey's already a very expensive sport. Soccer used to be just a ball and shoes. It's $5-10 grand now to play competitive soccer. It's wild. And travel soccer. And that's why we created Clever, was now to try to find other ways to give kids an edge. And video and how receptive athletes are to video was an easy way to do it, because every athlete and every parent and every coach have phones. So that's why we built Clever. Now, if we're getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of why sport is so expensive and it's very cost, especially in North America, the barrier to entry is way too high. Not everyone can go out and buy $1,500 worth of equipment, then pay $2,500 to play minor hockey or wherever it may be, or to play $5,000 worth of travel soccer a year. The European models have these pro teams, and again, you're talking tier 1, tier 2 level players that bring players in at a young age. There's either no cost or a low cost entry. So if you're going to play Man U, or there's 90 plus club teams in England and you're from that area, they will bring you in on no cost to low cost entry, get you into that system, but with the understanding that that player may be sold on the free market at another point, right? To bring that to basically offset the cost of letting these athletes play for a low cost at a young age. That exists in Europe. That does not exist here. There's no reason for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Calgary to have their own academy system, because if they are to bring kids in at low cost barrier to entry at 18, they just lose them to the draft. And so we can go all over on so many aspects of why sport is too expensive. And a big piece, especially in North America, why it's too expensive is because our pro sports teams give no kids real true access into the sport. They'll say, oh, let's go do a free skate at the pond. Okay, well then how are you going to get the kid to the pond the next day and the next day and the next day? It's how do you keep them coming back? Everyone does all these great incentives. We did a free skate and free equipment one day. Okay, that's amazing. But you still need the athletes to come back, whether it's hockey, baseball, basketball, soccer. Cost barrier is way too high now, and I always look back, what's the pinnacle for every athlete? To play pro women's hopefully one day, and it's amazing that they're going to have a league. Pro men's. But there needs to be some sort of system put in place that allows these teams to create low-cost barrier to entry across, North America. Otherwise, the gap's going to keep getting wider and wider, and it's getting crazier and crazier. A pair of skates now for a high-end pair of skates for a 12-year-old is $1,000.
Yeah,
up to $1,200. It's just not possible without getting help from above. And again, whether that's government, whatever it may be, but if you look at all these Europeans, they still have such a bigger pool to grab these athletes because they're finding a low barrier to entry. Again, with the understanding that if that player becomes good, they may be a valuable asset to that organization, but still getting kids to play sports is super important. Yeah. Getting them to fall in love with any sport is very important for social. They get and networking and being around kids that have aspirations and love what they're doing, and bringing it all the way back to clever. That's the first thing that we could think that is building the technology that gave everyone the tools that only certain people are getting.